I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. And one of the things that I find fascinating about Bruce Springsteen is people are so ingrained, his fans are so ingrained in his music. And when you go to a Bruce Springsteen concert, there are times where he will stop singing and the audience will sing the song back to him. It happens with all musicians. But if you're a business, think about how powerful it is if your audience can recite your song back to you, your message, your story, right? And so how did he do that? And what are the things that have resonated with the audience?
This is the Marketing Agency Power Hour, and I'm your host, Cal Wilder. Each week, we'll power through discussions on business challenges, success stories, and game-changing strategies. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, provider of bookkeeping and accounting for marketing agencies. Let's get started. So today's guest is somebody I'm really excited to be speaking with. He's a brand development expert with a specialization in public relations for B2B industries. He's also an entrepreneur, a storyteller, a company leader, managing operations and client development. He's the president and founder of Indicate Media. Todd Barrish, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cal. It's good to be here.
So tell me, what's the single most powerful strategy for success in your agency these days?
This is a great question. There is a lot. Look, public relations is about telling stories. And you can't tell stories if you are not steep in knowledge. And so, we spend a lot of time reading, listening, asking questions, asking ChatGPT and Perplexity questions to really get under the hood of what's happening in the world, what's happening within our clients' businesses, why their technology works, why somebody may buy their product or solution. So you can't have success if you don't understand fully multiple aspects of the story. So that's number one. Number two is we've spent a lot of time over the last year really trying to build processes for success. There was a time as a small business running a public relations agency that we were really good publicists because maybe of point number one, we spent a lot of time trying to be smart on things. But when somebody would come onto the team, I would say, oh, you should read this, or you should do this. And it was just my best thinking to try and get people into the mix of how we work and operate. But now we hired a chief operations officer, and we've spent the last year really building out processes for the way we operate, the many things we do, both client facing and internally. And it's been really a game changer for us because, you can't scale a business if the business isn't scalable. And scalability is not just at the macro level, it's in the weeds. And so, when someone comes onto a certain position that they were hired to do, and that position is clearly outlined and they have a path to success and resources and things they know they need to execute because those are the things the clients are expecting to look at or need for their reporting back. Those have been building that out has been a game changer for us. And it's been a great path to our success.
Great.
Yeah.
And you ran kind of a successful but smaller version of an Indicate for a number of years. And I'm curious what was the catalyst for wanting to implement the SOPs and, more scalability and growth focus?
As an entrepreneur, it wasn't my focus for many years to run around and try and build Indicate Media to as big as it possibly can be, which may go against, what a lot of entrepreneurs are doing. But for me, I loved being a publicist. And when I started Indicate Media, I started the business with 4 great client partners. And so it was jumping in from day one and doing the work. And I had one or two people with me, a guy named Peter, who's been with me all 15 years I've been in business, still with me today. And we were very good at what we did. But at the same time, we both, I think he had just gotten married. I got married. We had kids. And, we built a business that was super sustainable We were able to be there for our kids when they were young. We had more flexibility than, being full entrepreneurs and running around focusing on the growth of the business versus just doing the great work for the clients that were in front of us or, came to us. And that lasted a good long time, and we were very happy with that. Yeah, also, on the personal note, I didn't grow up with a dad in my household. It was very important for me to be there with for my my kid. Um, but time changes things, and my kid's a little older. Peter's kids are a little older. We see a path, especially in this new world of AI, to scale. And we've brought on people and resources because, look, we still have many, many years to go before retirement. We feel as fresh as ever. We feel great. And so, scale is, w- w- it took us a while to get there, but we're ready. We're ready to do, bigger things.
Were there any particular resources, books, or training or things that you would highlight that was helpful in getting you going down that path of standardizing the business?
The biggest lessons learned for me have been through our client partners. We're lucky because we work with businesses. We work with some incredible entrepreneurs who are figuring things out on a much larger scale. And every day we get on calls with them and say, what's happening in your business today and why and how are you thinking about this? So our best learning, literally, we're exposed to some great minds every day who are doing things in technology and software and AI and that has been, as much as I read, and I read tons. Wired is my favorite publication, and Fortune magazine. And as much as I listen to podcasts, the ability to listen to somebody through conversation and ask questions. Hey, you said that, but can you explain this more to me? Has been, has and continues to be the biggest win. And our look. My last point on this is, B2B tech is complex. It's you really have to get under the hood of it. It's look, you have to be very smart to do public relations no matter what. But it's an easier sell if you're promoting a hotel or you're promoting an alcohol brand. Still smart, you have to do it the correct way, but inherently people know what that is. But when you're talking about cloud or you just throw out a term artificial intelligence or data, you have to put context around it. But to truly understand the context, you have to learn. And to truly learn, the best way is to listen to the people that are actually in the weeds executing and be able to ask them questions. So, it's a long way to answer your question, but man, we learn a ton every single day.
Yeah, I think I've been lucky in my career that I've usually been in a position one way or the other to have to learn and have the opportunity to learn about all kinds of things. Back when I was in finance full time, it was all about learning business models and financial models and how companies, figure out how to make profit and return on their invested capital and to learn all these different industries, which was great. And then, now at SmartBooks, we work with all kinds of different clients at many different stages of growth. And, a lot of what we do with the bookkeeping, accounting, and tax is, kind of crunching numbers. And it's not that interactive all the time. But when we can occasionally sit down with the client and really understand, their business model, their focus for the next few years, what the implications are for their profit model and the economics of the business and kind of what drives the numbers up and down and kind of figure out what gets behind the numbers. That's really exciting.
I think that's right. And then also, you doing this great podcast. I mean, we did a prep call for this podcast and you asked me some very smart questions, but to ask me the smart questions, you had to look at my background and do research, right? And that gave you inherently insight and intelligence into public relations and B2B and myself. And we're doing the same thing, with our clients. And so it's a great way to enhance a knowledge base.
Yeah, that was really the genesis, as we talked about for the whole podcast. The marketing agency vertical is the single best one at SmartWorks. We have the most success over the years, been able to help people the most. I feel like we appreciated the most for our work. And so the podcast, it's all about figuring out, what's going on these days in agencies at a more detailed level, what's driving success, what are the challenges, how are you overcoming those challenges. What do you need to get from your accounting, bookkeeping, finance function to support your business goals and all that. So I've had a series of over 40 great conversations with agency owners over the last 10 or 11 months or so. So it's been great. It's been motivational.
I watched several. You're doing great. Super interesting stuff.
So you mentioned when we were talking the other week that you try to draw on history and stories, from like Greek and Roman days and other points in history to find examples or inspiration or ways to tell stories. Could you go into that in a little more detail?
You can draw parallels, practical leadership and story lessons from looking back at historical figures. The figures can be writers or activists or filmmakers or cultural icons, and try and translate those lessons into today's business lessons. Some of it is like best thinking, and some of it is, you know, literally what's happening in front of you. So an example would be like when Martin Luther King gave his famous speech on the Mall in Washington, D.C. You watch the speech, and obviously the historical significance is incredible. But the phrasing of his speech, the way he delivered, the way he drew people in. This is one example. So when I'm giving a presentation or I am speaking to a room, I pay attention to phrasing, how I'm delivering a message, when I pause, when I'm trying to have moments be more powerful. And that's just one example. And you can look across the world, and you can go all the way back to Homer and Sophocles to JFK to Martin Luther King to actors and musicians. I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. And one of the things that I find fascinating about Bruce Springsteen is his fans are so ingrained in his music. And when you go to a Bruce Springsteen concert, there are times where he will stop singing and the audience will sing the song back to him. It happens with all musicians. But if you're a business, think about how powerful it is if your audience can recite your song back to you, your message, your story, right? And so how did he do that? And what are the things that have resonated with the audience? So I'm always trying to draw a parallel between, and I'm a history person. I was a history minor. So I'm always trying to draw those parallels and find interesting ways to say, if I study this person, what insight can I draw? And then how can I use it? And I'm actually going to be putting some of those messages on YouTube myself in the coming year. Just to give insight, because I think it's an interesting hook on looking at history, which in is important, to understand history, and then how you can apply it to business today. So, it's just another hook on things, but it's a passion of mine.
And so as you started to hire staff and put them through your onboarding process, do you tend to hire folks who already have a background in storytelling, or are you trying to kind of mold them in your way and indicate?
Well, it's some of both, but I will tell you this: what doesn't work or hasn't worked for us, and I don't, and I generally think doesn't work for a business like mine anyway, like public relations agency, is just using my best thinking. Hey, I really like this person. I thought we had a good rapport, and I think they'll be good for the gig. Let's hire them. Because sometimes on the back end of that, they are great people, but completely inadequate for the job, just not the right fit. It's not a judgment on people. It's just about the position and what we need executed out in the position. So today we take a much smarter approach. It's a book called The Who Method that I read
I love that book.
a long time ago. Yeah. And so now what we do is we've created a model where it's very defined, our interview process. We're asking specific questions, and then we're taking notes, and we are rating how we feel about the answer. Right there and then in real time. I ask you, tell me about a problem you've had in the past. you may say it and I might think, oh, that was good. I'll give you a 4. I might think, oh, you didn't really tell me about a problem. I'll give you 2. Anyway, the collective sum of the whole between speaking to me and speaking to other people in the agency gives us a percentage. And we are trying to hit a certain percentage number to say this person answered the questions in a way that we think resonate to the position we're trying to hire to. And we can see it not based on just best thinking, but based on talking to several people and being more mechanical in the approach. And it's really been a game changer for us because I love people and I'm like, yeah, you're cool. We're cool. This is a great conversation. Let's do this. And the wrong person for the gig. So being smarter and being more intentional about the approach has been very good for us. And if anybody like the spreadsheet, by the way, just reach out to me and I'll give anybody what we made and they can use it.
Oh, that's a great offer. Thanks so much, Todd. Yeah. And I think The Who was written by Jeff Smart, who I think is the son of the author of the book Top Grading. The father might have been Brad Smart. I can't quite remember the father's name, but I stumbled across the book Top Grading back in the, early 2000s, 2001, 2002, something like that. And it was all about, it was similar to Who, but it was more about how do you conduct the interview process where you peel back the onion, you ask a series of questions. If say I'm hiring an accountant, I say, do you have experience with revenue recognition for software companies? And they might say yes. And I might look at their resume and say, hey, they worked at a software company. They probably, yeah, they have experience. I'll check the box. But I don't know if they have any skill in that area. They just said they did. And then I say, well, give me an example of when you had to apply revenue recognition. And how did you, make that policy decision? And what were some exceptions or challenges that didn't fit the model? How did you handle that? Were you audited? Just kind of drill in and get them to explain how they did the work to give you some evidence that they have skill in that area versus just checking the box that they have experience in that area.
Yeah, it's super smart and leading down the same path, where if you ask questions that allow somebody to show you or tell you they have the right experience, and then you rate them on you think they answered it the right way, or look, if that's your business, that's our business. We know if it feels like a good answer or not a good answer. Then at the top level, if you see the percentage of they answered enough questions and it hit a certain percentage, you start to get a sense of this is a good candidate.
So you're trying to scale the business now, which is exciting. I love growth. Trying to figure out how to grow my business a little more these days too. But I'm curious how, what are your goals, dreams, ambitions for the next few years? And if we sat down in a few years, how would we measure that success?
Well, we'll measure it by revenue, first and foremost. Internally, we with my team around me, my senior team, that's what we think about. But we're in a very interesting time, right? So in an old world, maybe even last year, the year before, you would measure it by revenue and growth of the staff, the team, but we're all trying to figure out now, and by forget the numbers, but do they pay me $100,000 a month, or do they pay me $200,000 a month? Again, I'm way inflating numbers, but because if my base is $100,000 a month and I take a $50,000 a month client, that's not, then I've gone backwards, right? That was the old way to think about it. But today, because of AI and because of agents that are coming, and because a lot of work is going to be automated at a very certain level, we are in a very redefining moment. And so where revenue may go up, and that is our objective for scale, it doesn't mean that we have to have more people. It doesn't, and it doesn't mean that the revenue per client has to be as big as it once was. We may be able to lower the price and work with more clients with less people over the next several years because we are automating things and bringing human capability to a very as a specialty against the things that we do, in public relations, in storytelling, in lining up your story with your business objectives. So we are in a very redefining moment. And so scale, again, for us, well, we want to grow our revenue. We want to take care of all the people around me and have a good culture and team. But that's where right now we're starting and stopping, because I don't know exactly the shakeout of, do I need three people to do the job that three people used to do? Or can one AI agent do it? And then one other person does something on top of that as a manager per se, but we get double the efficiency and output and ultimately benefit for the client. So it's amazing. It's like we're really in this new world. And as an entrepreneur, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, who was just a publicist for a long time, it's super exciting to me again, because I get to put my entrepreneur hat back on and work on the business more than I'm working in the business. So it's exciting.
I think it's smart that, you're thinking comprehensively about how AI impacts the business model, not just, how I can deliver current services to current clients more efficiently or with fewer people or something like that. But you're thinking about, well, bigger clients aren't always better. Maybe AI, maybe the business model will allow me to service more smaller clients just as efficiently and profitably and successfully. And think about what are the skill sets of the next employees that I need to hire, which might be different than the skill sets of the last employees that I needed to hire. So yeah, it's definitely a dynamic time we're in here for a lot of us. Yeah.
Yeah. But by the way, I don't even know that the clients need to be smaller. I mean, I still may work with, Series A, Series B, significant size companies, but I may be able to charge them less because the model has changed. Right. And so it's still doing the things we do, which at the very end of the day is we tell stories designed to help companies achieve their business outcomes, help them with their business objective, right? Not for brand's sake, for business sake.
And one of the big challenges we'll see what's the impact on profit margins? Is AI going to commoditize things and, potentially drive down margins, or is, revenue per client, or, at the same margin, or less revenue at lower margin, or, however it plays out. But, is it a commoditization tool, or is it just a tool that allows you to continue to deliver really high value and charge a premium price if you're really good at what you do?
I still think it's the latter, because I think there's a specialty in the work we do, in understanding how to tell stories, but how to tell B2B technology stories specifically, and have the relationships and understand not just the companies we work with, but the buyers of their services. So, we believe the people who do what we do very well is a specialty, and it stands out.
Yeah, I can definitely see in the PR space and figuring out what stories to tell and making sure you're telling the right stories that resonate with the right audience. Yeah, definitely a specialty. You could ask AI to, come up with a story for an audience, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I got to ask you a question or two about how you manage, the books and the finance and their financial reporting at your firm. Who do you have do the work, and how do you kind of monitor it and stay on top of it and get the information you need to manage the business?
We use a platform called Bench, which was just recently acquired by another platform called Gusto. And Bench has really automated in a lot of ways the bookkeeping. And then we have a bookkeeper within Bench that helps us, monthly reconciles the books and such. So, as a small business, it's not very complex. It's just about obviously with any books, it's just about staying on top of it. So we use Bench, and that is our bookkeeping solution. Now, internally with my chief operations officer, we have our own internal documents where we are forecasting, we are watching the numbers, we're seeing how profitable accounts are, how much value based on the amount of hours the team is spending against the account. We're looking at things at a very, very micro level now to truly get a full picture of the business. So between Gusto as our payroll provider and Bench as our bookkeeper. And then of course we have an accountant that sits on top of it, and our own internal, spreadsheets and, you know, path to success. That's our secret sauce.
Yeah, client profitability is key, whether you charge fixed price for projects or still hourly, you still have a budget to work within. Um, and so do you, and timesheets always come up as an issue in agencies and other professional services firms. Are timesheets, stone age and archaic at this point and insulting to ask employees to do, or do they provide critical value because your single largest cost by far is payroll? And you've got to know how much of that cost is going against what clients and what projects. And so you need timesheets. I'm curious your perspective on it, and then I'll share mine.
Critical value for us, right? Because when we didn't do timesheets and we didn't track people's time, the the ability to make the next hire or to forecast the hires we want to make in the future was based on our best guess. Oh yeah, seems like we're getting busy. You know, I think we're going to need another person. Bandwidth feels tight. But by tracking people's time and truly looking against how much time is spent on an account, what the profitability is the profitability line where we want it? Is it well over, which means we have extra bandwidth? Is it under, we don't have enough bandwidth? That tells us, okay, where we need to be in line with who we can hire next, what that salary range should be. So timesheets, they're work for sure. We try and, make them fun if you can make timesheets fun through encouragement. But from a management perspective, they are a game changer. We need data, we operate best when we have the most data. But I'm curious to know, what do you think?
I completely agree with you. When you're in a business where time and payroll cost is by far the single largest cost, you need that data to manage profitability, or else, like you said, you're managing on intuition or anecdotal stories or who's complaining the loudest about something. But you're not managing with accurate data. But having said that, modern technology makes timesheets very easy. Gone are the days when the employee really needs to sit down with a spreadsheet and manually fill it out. Like all these applications, like Harvest, for example, they all have these timers built in. So if you've got a good professional services automation or project management app that you're using, that has a built-in timer, you set up the tasks related to the project. Someone starts working on something, they click a button. When they're done working on that thing, they click a button to stop, and the time just gets captured automatically. Shouldn't really take much extra time for the employee to log their timesheet because they're not really creating a timesheet. They're just logging time against tasks in the ordinary flow of business. So that's my perspective on it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I tend to agree. The challenge we hear, and I get it, is we go through. Look, I may be talking to you a second later. I'm talking to somebody else about a different client. I'm on one call. I'm sending one email, and so that timer, you would constantly be on off because we're moving. We have a client base. Then different things. We're rolling around different clients, different tasks throughout any given day. But the ability to kind of understand your day, have a good plan for your day, know where your time falls, and then put it into the timesheet it's invaluable.
And I think depending on the role and the level of the individual in the organization, they may have more of that bouncing around or less of that bouncing around. Or, but I'll tell you, I've got some, a lot of people in SmartBooks probably, I mean, they might do, 50 different billable events, quote unquote, billable events, per day in our system that we built using timers. And it's just part of the workflow we built in. So I don't know how you could manage, professional services, project-based business without timesheet data. I mean, maybe if you're in a niche and you're well established and the scope of the work is really narrowly defined, and there's not scope creep to manage, and you can price it in a way that most of the time it's nicely profitable. There's some people who do have the luxury of not having to worry too much about it because it just kind of their business model just works. And maybe if you're smaller, the business model can just work because the owners and the founders have their pulse on every client or most of the clients and a lot of the projects, and they can just kind of manage it by gut and, intuition, and that can work. If they've got a good solid business model and client base and are on top of things. But to scale a business, I'm not sure how you could scale a professional services business without timesheet data. I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, well, I'm proof that it didn't work. Not that we were trying to scale, but we couldn't have scaled until we implemented timesheets. It was part of the organization of focus on scale.
You've spoken with some excitement about the features. You've highlighted a couple things. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight that you find particularly exciting about the future for your business, your industry?
And I'm just super excited about the potential. AI doesn't scare me. Maybe because I'm a tech guy, I've been in tech for 20 years. I think it's fascinating. And I think, look, does there need to be parameters and, do we worry about the drone wars? Yes. In a sci-fi way, of course. But I love what it's doing and what it's enabling us to do and what it will enable us to do. I don't think that storytelling is going away. And I think the management of a business story will always be important. You can't just rely on regurgitated content for your story to, to live, to breathe. It has to have fresh insight. There has to be fuel put on the fire. And worst, there's a new, there, I, I've been telling clients there's a new definition of crisis management. And that definition is it's not that, hey, your CEO or your CFO just stole $20 million from you. Okay, that's a crisis. But now it's your client complains and someone goes to ChatGPT or one of the search engines. And when they type in your company to do research, all they see is the complaint because you haven't done enough to fuel the fire to talk about the many, many other things you're doing. In and of itself, that's a crisis. So the need to execute smart public relations, to have a strategic communications strategy, to be out there talking, storytelling, being in the press, writing your own content, is super important. And where AI and computers will help with that process, I don't think that will eclipse human insight. I think human insight will play us, and it will continue to play a super important part for well into the future. So, I'm excited to ride that wave.
So if we go back in time a little bit, to your days as a little boy and growing up in Northern Virginia, did you think you'd be one day owning and managing your own business?
I always felt like I had a tick to be an entrepreneur. I didn't, honestly, I didn't know what it would look like. Certainly not in the public relations realm. The public relations realm I was a communications major in college, but public relations came when I got to New York City. Um, and then I ultimately found my path towards um, starting a PR company, a PR business. Um, when I came to New York City, I had exactly $250 in my pocket and a dream and a buddy who said I could sleep on his couch on 86 and 3rd. And so, and this was many, many years ago when there was something super exciting happening in the world. It was called the internet and the dot-com boom, way back in the early 2000s. But at the time, my first job in public relations was, I think I was paid like 28,000, maybe, you can't live in New York City by any means back then or today on $28,000 a year. So, it became a hustle to understand how I'm going to, be in this career, stay in New York City, but advance my career and then ultimately advance my personal life. And so entrepreneurship was never far off in my mind. And then a series of things needed to happen for me ultimately to go, okay, I'm ready. But eventually it did.
Yeah, you had to be an entrepreneur first to figure out how to, climb compensation ladder, earn enough money to live in New York City. And then you have to be an entrepreneur to figure out how to start and run a business of your own.
Look, like anything, it was a journey. It was a journey. I'll give you the quick story. For me, it was a journey because my mom was mad at me, in a nutshell. She called one day and she said, how much debt are you in? And I think I had racked up, I don't know, 70, $80,000 on the credit card. And it was because I was making my $28,000 a year and then putting everything else on the credit card. And for me, it was just part of the life, like I'm in New York City and I have to eat and I want to go out and I want to do things. And I was very good in my younger days of going out. I was out. I was out at night. I was out with my colleagues. I was out with, people I would meet. And, it wasn't necessarily always drinking or partying, but I was out. And I was, when it was my turn to buy the round or whatever, I would put the credit card down. I'm like that when it's, I want to do my part. And then when she called and she asked that question 3 or 4 years into it, she was pretty mad at me. Well, what are you doing? How are you ever going to pay that back? Like how are you going to survive? And I remember being upset that my mom was so mad at me. And I was sitting in my apartment and it was over a weekend and I was thinking about it. Well, my mom's mad. What am I going to do? How am I going to ever overcome this? And I realized that I was looking at a wall. And it hit me. I was literally looking at a wall of like 300 business cards that I had collected over the course of the last couple of years. This was before LinkedIn, but I was always very good at, hey, can I have your business card? And I used to take like little notes, just how I met those people. So that weekend, I started categorizing the cards. I went to Excel, who they were, who I met, and I started reaching out to people. Hey, we met, this and that. And then all of a sudden, I brought in like one new account for my company that I was working at many years ago. And then I brought in two and then like three. And I was just like a young kid, 25, 26. And I was bringing business to a smaller company. And it kind of it gave me that taste of, hey, I can work with people. I can source business. And when I left that one company and went to the next, I think I was what they call, I think I was an account manager. Maybe I was like a senior account executive. I was like a mid-level person on my way. But when I went to my next company, I jumped to senior vice president. It was like 5 or 6 moves. And that was because I was able to bring business with me. And so it just was fueling my own entrepreneurial fire of, first, I can go out and I can get business and I can bring. Second, I can negotiate deals now because my own personal deal of A, asking clients to come with me, and then B, negotiating it with who became my future boss. And it was just stepping stones until I was ready to start, my own journey. And eventually I did.
Well, thank you for sharing that story and all the detail that you did. I really appreciate that.
Life is funny, but you're on the ride. And I'm a focused guy. And, I'm looking for ways and I feel good, like many more years before retirement. So me, my team, the opportunity with technology, I think it's great times ahead. It's crazy times in the world, but the world moves in its own way and all you can do is play your game within, control the things you can control.
And so you're in northern New Jersey now, right?
Yeah. Right outside of New York City.
And are a lot of your clients in that general area, or you work with people across the country?
Yeah, across country, and even several clients are based in India. So we have, we do some international work too.
And how do you play with other agencies that might be in those same clients? What's that relationship like?
Oh, it's great. A lot of times our clients they'll do partner announcements or something, and we'll be tied into other agencies. I'm never on a, hey, we have to step on someone else's stuff to try and advance our own thing. I don't believe in that. I believe our work stands for itself. I believe in this business that I'm in there's tons of opportunity. There's enough opportunity for everybody. I also believe my business is very supply and demand driven, and you got to ride the waves when there's demand, and capture supply. And we work great with people, and it's a great question you ask, how, and it's a conscious thing that I tell the team. Like, if somebody asks for something, give it to them. As long as it's not proprietary, or it's not, something the client wouldn't want to share, of course, but let's give it to them. Let's be open. Let's answer questions. Let's build relationships, because it's relationships that years later turn into potential new clients or potential other things down the road. And my career has been full of examples of that.
So if you could go back in time to early years of Activate and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself?
I would probably focus on scaling the business a little bit earlier, because I think the potential was there. Um, and maybe, look, that's not the first 7 years of my son, but maybe just a little bit earlier than we did. Number one, um, I would I would l- try and be a better, the Who method that we talked about. I would have tried and found that a long time ago. And again, for a long time, and I've worked with some great people, but I've also worked with some people who were great and not great for the role. And I think, like, if I, would have found a better fit for the role earlier on, both within Indicate Media and then maybe jobs I've had before, things could have, progressed better, or who knows.
Yeah, I think most of us who have started businesses learn the hard way that about the Who method one way or the other, and the need to get better at evaluating and making better hiring decisions to make sure there's a good mutual fit. So I'm certainly in the same boat there. I think most business owners are.
Yeah. And one more thing, and it's a thing that just, I'm a fully honest guy. I think that when I was younger and I was bringing in business, and I did that jump, you know, um, and I saw that jump in my salary and everything. I think it brought some arrogance, and um, and look, I'm never an outward arrogantly guy. At least I don't think so. But I think arrogance can cloud decisions or the ability to listen to what other people have to say. And in retrospect, I think some of the things other people had to say, if I would have not had that arrogance level, and maybe arrogance isn't even the right word, but um, I would have learned, important lessons earlier on. And you can't go back, but you can only go forward and look back and try and realize where you could have been better and how you can be better moving forward.
When when you're not working, what do you like to do?
I love to listen and play music. I don't get to play music as much as possible, but I do have a little music studio behind me.
What instruments do you play?
I play the drums. I'm a terrible, terrible singer, although in my head I'm a great singer. Um, but I'm a drummer and I've been in bands before. I like to hang out with the family and friends. I love going to concerts. Um, we have a golden doodle, and he's a great dog. So anytime we can just hang out, get the dog out, that's always fun. And like everybody, I love to travel anywhere we can go. We haven't done a ton of travel. It was COVID. My son was in an age where COVID stopped a lot of things. But now, we've done a couple of cruises. We're planning on a big trip to take him to Japan and ultimately international. We want to get him out there into the world. So, yeah.
So Todd, I know you offered to give anybody who asks your checklist for hiring and interviewing decisions, right? So people want to reach out to you about getting that or talk to you about doing PR for their business. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Just todd@indicatemedia.com is my email address. Anyone can email me anytime, or you can LinkedIn me, at any point. Or you can go to the website and find me. you could tweet at me or, whatever. There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of me. But look, I'm an open book. I love sharing resources. I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything and give advice. In my world, I don't think advice is the end all be all. I think it's about the execution. So if advice helps somebody, feel free to reach out. Let's talk.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time you spent and being the open book that you've been for the last 45 or 50 minutes, whatever it's been. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Todd.
Yeah, thank you for this. I mean, again, I love the podcast. I think you're asking like super interesting questions, and I appreciate you having me on.
Sure. So for those listening today, if you enjoyed this and the stories Todd shared and hear about some trials and tribulations and successes of another agency owner, please spread the word about this podcast. Let your peers know it exists. Looking to build the community here. So thanks again, Todd.
Yeah.
This has been another exciting episode of the Marketing Agency Power Hour. We'll see you all next time. Another episode in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. For show notes and more, please visit marketingagencypowerhour.com. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, providing marketing agencies with bookkeeping, accounting, and finance support. With SmartBooks, you gain the clarity and confidence to make your agency a success. Until next time,